Hi everyone, welcome to our session on real-time response, frontline management of emergency crew. Today we'll be hearing from the Local Government Association of South Australia. So before we do that, just a quick administrative slide here, a legal slide. We'll just keep going through. Okay, so let's start with introductions. My name is Emily Haig and I head up consulting here in APAC for Smartsheet. My background's in management consulting, where I've specialised in technology and customer experience. So my role is essentially to help customers to better digitally enable their businesses through using Smartsheet for things like process innovation, workflow standardisation, or increasing collaboration or insights. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Scott Leckel, who, as I said, is from the Local Government Association of South Australia. Who is in the thick of things managing some of our most important community emergencies. So Scott is an emergency recovery operationals professional specialised in preparation and execution during high-risk incidents and events. So in his current role as operations manager, he's responsible for coordinating 68 councils during emergencies. No doubt a complicated but very important role, as I'm sure you can agree. Key elements include working with senior council commanders, CEOs and other executives, along with senior emergency services and state government personnel, so quite a mix of people. So a key challenge in Scott's role has been to coordinate all these various groups and to solve those challenges which I mentioned. In his last 7 years, he's flagged that the 10 months of late have been the most challenging yet most rewarding. He's been heavily involved in the Australian bushfires, which affected South Australia, and also the global pandemic, COVID-19, that's brought the world to a bit of a standstill, as we know. So he knows only too well the benefits of making sure that he can organise these groups of people, keep it streamlined, to ensure that there's a positive outcome for the wider community. So today, Scott, he's going to take us through how he captures data, works with these 68 councils, and also provides real-time action plans and reports for hundreds of stakeholders, which is quite impressive. It does sound very busy, Scott, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. So without further ado, Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Emily. And thank you to Smartsheet for this opportunity to present our user story as well. I think we can share some good insights, and hopefully out of this we can all do some learning, which would be fantastic. So I'll start by just talking about what the functional support group is. So the LGFSG, we love acronyms in emergency management, of course, but it is the Local Government Functional Support Group. In South Australia, all the councils, all 68, are coordinated during large emergencies by that group, and it's actually made up of the council as well. Our key roles there are to coordinate the response from the 68 councils during large emergencies and make sure that communication, coordination and support are our key goals. So it's really important, depending on the type of emergency, to make sure that stuff is all kept to the forefront. For example, during the bushfires, coordination was a large effort because we had a lot of people involved. As you can see from the photo on the screen, that's a picture of a crew on one day during the Kangaroo Island fires. And that was just local government crews. That was made up of councils. And in that picture alone, there's about 6 to 8 different councils. And then where COVID, not so much tactical response, but certainly a lot of communication, briefings, etc. And we'll find a little bit more out of that as we progress through. Really what it's about is getting the right people with the right training and the right resources to the right place at the right time to be able to provide that support. Just a quick snapshot of what we have undertaken over the last 10 to 11 months now. Time's going past pretty quick. But during the bushfires in South Australia, there were quite a number of bushfires. These are just the larger ones. But in total, local government came together to support all of these fires in some way, shape or form. And some of those of real note were the Kangaroo Island fire, where we had up to 24 different councils providing support. And that was for a long duration. We also had our Cuddly Creek or Adelaide Hills fire, where there was about 16 councils providing support. But all up, we're talking 68 different pieces of plant, a couple of hundred staff, 39 councils. It actually went up to about 42. But we're talking thousands of hours, etc. So there's a large commitment And that all takes coordination. And part of that coordination is having the right resources and technology to enable that, because it's not just a matter of having a phone call, you've got to back it up with systems. A bit of a snapshot on our COVID operations. We were undertaking staff briefings for all of local government on a regular basis. In the height of it, 3 briefings a week, and those briefings were attended anywhere between 80 to 100 people. We were operational in the real brunt of it in Adelaide. It's certainly got a lower tempo now, but during the real critical parts, we were operational for 96 days. And that was, majority of that was 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. So quite extensive. But the parts which Smartsheet helped out with is we actually undertook about 120,000 COVID compliance checks. So this meant council staff going out to the community, having a chat, making sure people understood what restrictions were in place and how they could help them. Most of it was based on education. It wasn't about telling people off, it was about education. But whenever they visited somewhere, they needed to record that. And we utilised Smartsheet to do that using the web forms. And that meant instant access, or pretty close to instant access, for people like police and health agencies to be able to see what we're out there doing. And then we also asked councils to report on a weekly basis about the impacts and the challenges they were having. And we utilised Smartsheet forms for that also. So just to give you a bit of a glimpse of the types of environments we work in, this is what we would call one of our emergency support teams. So this isn't just local government, but you can see around the table there's police, there's health, there's Australian Defence Force, there's a lot of other agencies, utilities, including local government. But this is the type of environment we're working. So it's on iPads, it's on mobile technology. It's not in a dedicated command centre with a lot of infrastructure. So you need a product, or you need tools that are going to be able to be very easily used in a mobile capacity in a situation where you might not even be your room, it's somebody else's.
Got it. So look, they're very impressive in terms of the scale and the different stakeholder groups. I'd be really interested, I guess, to hear a little bit more around how you got buy-in from using a tool. I think it's fairly common that not necessarily everyone has technical skills or is interested. So I'd love to hear, given the diversity, what did you do to get people on board? Any sort of training, support, and usability, those sorts of things?
Yeah, good questions, Emily. I think the main thing I will say at first is we did go down the path of basically not giving a choice. And I know that might sound a bit dogmatic, but the reality was what we didn't want to do is get corrupt data or different data. So we said, look, let's use a single tool to capture this data so the quality is there. So that was point number one. But we also acknowledge that each organisation may have some challenges with individual staff not being tech savvy or having to have some internal processes that we marry up with. So there were some slight things we undertook, and that was the ability for users to have access direct to the Smartsheet or a report, so they could do bulk uploads rather than a web form if they needed. But the majority was certainly undertaken by web forms. And what we actually found by doing only a few minutes worth of training, if that, that was enough to get people over the line to understand how to fill in a web form. A few things we implemented is we didn't have the need to create a username and password to log in. So to minimise the challenges for people, and a lot of times when I talk to people about technology, the amount of times a username and password question comes up is just, it's amazing. So we eliminated those needs. We made it a publicly available, but we didn't share that link with anyone that didn't need it. But publicly available was number one. So get rid of the username and password issues. Two was keep the questions simple. And it's agile enough that we could modify them on the go. And for those that really did have technology issues at a real base level, we worked with their organisations who were participating with us on other solutions that they could adopt. And in some ways, they said some team members would collect some data manually and then enter it into the app or something similar very shortly after. So then the diversity was certainly there. We had hundreds of people out there doing those compliance checks. It wasn't just a matter of 4 or 5. There were hundreds of people, different collaborators that were accessing that technology and being able to provide that information through. So just in summary with that, I think the main things are don't give too many options is what we found useful. With the options we do give, making sure they are easy to use, easy to follow, and eliminate the extra steps that aren't needed.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Impressive. I mean, it sounds like you've been very successful, so that's really valuable and no doubt helpful for the audience to hear. So I'll leave you to keep going through, Scott, to the next piece.
Thanks, Ellen. So what I did want to touch on now is just how did we actually use, or sorry, what do we use Smartsheet for? Now, it is important to acknowledge that, emergencies don't occur 24/7 for the whole year normally. Let's not talk about COVID. But generally speaking, there are times where what we call outside of emergencies. So outside of emergencies, we do use Smartsheet for training course registration and data capture. So how many people attended the course, etc. And we use that for dashboard reporting because we do have requirements to funders and a range of things to report back on. We use it for our everyday work plan reporting. So what tasks are being undertaken, what's been completed, how we're going, because we need to keep track of that sort of view. We do use it for our operational readiness dashboard. So this is about saying that if all the boxes are green, we know that as an emergency response organisation that we are ready to go. So if we had an issue with a piece of technology or with the readiness of some equipment because it's been deployed and hasn't come back yet, we do that through dashboard reporting. And we also do things like recruitment of staff and volunteers. So during COVID was probably the best example, we had many expressions of interest from council people coming along to the functional support group to provide support. We use Smartsheet as the onboarding tool for that. So they put their registration of interest through a web form. That web form then notified somebody that was waiting for them. Once that was notified, they did an update request and said, yep, let's get this person on board. And it actually managed our onboarding cycle all the way through to when they were sitting in the seat, which was fantastic. During emergencies, we then use the same sort of tools, but we use them slightly differently. Data capture from field crews was really the big part of how do we actually get information from a variety of people. And I'll just reiterate that 68 councils, bearing in mind that means 68 different systems that they often use, or maybe there might be 20 or 30 different systems, but Smartsheet offered a common platform. Time or activity records, so we want to know what people did and when, so we can actually report on that and be able to use that in our lessons management later on. Rapid survey data, so an example of that, both the rapid survey data but also impact assessment stuff, is the weekly reports we're asking councils to complete about the impacts of COVID. But also, we have some new processes in place around heat waves now. So that when there's a heat wave warning issued for South Australia, depending on the area, we ask the councils to fill in a survey that we're required to report back up to the state control agency, being the State Emergency Service, for that emergency. We also use it in our operations centres for task requests. So when a request comes in from an agency to be able to undertake something, we put the request in through Smartsheet. It emails the person responsible and says, you've got a task waiting. They can put in some notes and comments and they can close it off, etc. And we do that through dashboards, forms, reports, a range of things. We also use it for our e-log. So this is the electronic log, so the formal log of what we do. And we also use it for task tracking.
Got it. Wow.
So what we do in addition to Smartsheet is add in some integrations as well. So I will point out too that so we partnered, or we use one of the Smartsheet Gold partners, AC Consult, Adrian Cools there. So if something is a bit more complex or new, or to be honest, we just don't have time to put it in place and we want someone else to do it, then we engage with the Smartsheet partner to do that. The advantages I've found with the partnership program is that if you don't know the answer, you can ask someone. And during emergencies, it's okay to Google some things, but sometimes you just want someone to answer the question, and that support was fantastic. And then, of course, there's the additional support from Smartsheet. But we do have email integrations. We've got SMS integrations through ClickSend. We utilise the Smartsheet app as well for the actual people who create Smartsheet. So within 2 clicks, I can see who the latest people to register expression of interest are just by getting on the app. It's fantastic. We've just recently implemented Dynamic View as well, which has been great because we collaborate with a heap of externals like police or health. We don't need them to see the whole Smartsheet, so we can limit some of that, which is fantastic. And the little box about IR, that's our iRespond app. We have an app for local government during emergencies, and we integrate with that too. That means we can put Smartsheet links and form links, etc. on it. So there's a variety of different tools in the way we use it. And a little bit later, I'll just talk about some real advantages we found with this.
Wonderful. Well, look, it sounds like you're really making use of all different aspects. And I love hearing about, I guess, the complexity of the business and then how you've managed to work it into different pieces. So, Scott, I'm interested to hear, in terms of evaluating tools, what other tools did you look at when you were looking at getting, an automation tool and collaboration tool? And what did you consider?
Yeah, good question. So, look, we looked at a couple of specific emergency management type tools. And what we found is So the functional support group is not very old in real terms. We're only 4 years old this November. And these latest bushfires and COVID were the first time we really had significant emergencies in South Australia that affected our role. So we didn't want to go and spend several hundreds of $1,000s on a tool that we actually didn't really know what we needed. So our starting point was saying, look, we don't know exactly what we need to do, but we need a tool that's agile and can be maneuvered enough to fill in some gaps to understand better and almost do that minimum viable product type concept. So we did look at Microsoft products and we looked at things like MS Forms, etc. What we found was difficult with it was the way you had to collaborate with people, because Microsoft's very geared up to users having a Microsoft account or something similar. And we found some challenges with that, especially in some of the, where we're just asking somebody in the field to fill in some forms. We also found that it was very modular. So you had to bolt many things together to make it work. And most of those options, we ended up coming back to the Smartsheet view of going, it does a majority of things within its core. So we can modify it, we can update it, we can manage that. And we didn't want to go to 3 or 4 different apps to achieve that goal just to be able to do a web form. At the moment, we do a web form, it shows us the information instantly in a table and we can do something with it. So we did look at a variety of options and this is where we landed back with. And to be honest, cost was part of it as well. The costs are quite low compared to some of those bespoke systems.
Got it.
Thank you. Okay. This one, I'll just throw another picture in there just to give you an example of the types of environments. So this is the people, again, on Kangaroo Island as an example. But as you can see, we're working in sometimes transportable facilities. So not only just working with our other agencies, but this is just local government. And, some of these people use technology every day, some don't. We had coverage issues with mobile phones and a range of things, but it's just giving you the picture of the types of environments that we need these solutions to work in. I thought I'd just take a few moments of your time to just talk about the real pros that we've found with Smartsheet. Number one really was that rapid and agile development approach, that it can take a matter of just a few minutes to get a new web form up and running and then the link sent out so that people can populate that data. It is much more efficient than sending out a spreadsheet, asking them all to send back that same spreadsheet, etc. It just had a lot of benefits in that real agile and rapid development. The collaborators, there is no cost for that. So, if we send someone a link to fill in a web form, and as I mentioned before, we had hundreds of those during the emergency. It's not all about money, but it does need to be factored in. If you have to start paying a user fee for everybody that contributes, you end up with a large bill. Cost-effective flows onto that, as I said. We found that with minimal training, and in fact, some people we didn't give any training, we said, just give it a crack. They were able to do things without technical experts. Now, look, there's some things that do need a little bit more of a technical expert, and that's where we partner with somebody for that. But reality is there's good online material. So if you take the time, you don't have to be the expert at Smartsheet to soon become one. And I think that's what we found a real advantage. Minimal issues with external users and firewalls. And the reason I put this one in here is with some of the other products, we did find a lot of organisations have various firewall rules, and it was difficult to sometimes use different products. There were a couple of councils that still had the issues with the firewalls, but we solved them pretty quickly. But it wasn't as much as what we found with some other products. And look, overall, the reality is there's good technical support. So whether that's through the online videos, whether that's going through a partner, or whether it's contacting Smartsheet direct, we found that there was good support in being able to solve our problems and actually trying to understand our business, because our business is often different to other things. So that's really my summary of the pros. So thank you very much for the time today to be able to present on this. I really value the contribution that's been made from Smartsheet towards what we've been doing, but I also look forward to the future and any additional information we can get.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Scott. I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about how you evaluated different businesses, what the pros and cons were, and what you were able to do as well. I think the sounds like you've got a lot of value, which is fantastic to hear. So thanks so much for getting into that. So I think that there's probably a lot of people in the audience as well who've really enjoyed today's presentation, and hopefully they've been putting their questions through on the chat as we've been going through. So now what we're going to do is a bit more of a Q&A with you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I love talking.
Excellent. Well, you're in the right place and doing an interview. Okay, so look, with the tool, we've kind of touched on this a bit, but maybe you can just give a quick summary. So in terms of business efficiencies and quantifiable benefits, how would you explain that, I guess, to the audience in terms of what your saving was?
Yeah, good question. It's something I really struggle with in the emergency management sector more broadly, is about quantifying against costs, because a lot of this stuff was new to us. So it's difficult to say it saved X amount of dollars because we weren't spending the dollars beforehand. So it's hard to sort of quantify from that. But what I can say is certainly time-wise, we had hundreds of collaborators entering data. If we didn't use a tool like this, the reality is they might have used a paper form or used their own systems. We would have then had to collate 68 different things into a single tool. And automatically we know that's going to take a lot of time. It would have meant large delays in the actual close to real-time approach to this. So during incidents, you often want that information as quickly as possible. If you then had to use different tools, different approaches, it's going to take a while. So as much as I can't give a dollar figure, it's very obvious that using a single tool that can do multiple things and display it close to real time as possible, it saves money and time. Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Another question which would be, I think, quite useful for the audience as well is just talking about the journey. So what were the pain points and the challenges that you faced at a high level? And then what were the impacts to your business or your organisation rather? And basically before being able to use a tool like this.
Yeah, sure. With the first pain point, I'll go back to really our first pain point was we didn't know what we didn't know, and we didn't know what we might need. And that really was the biggest pain point, is going, well, it's not an off-the-shelf product, but not only that, what we were doing wasn't off the shelf. And certainly during COVID, a lot of these things came from left field and were unusual, not been explored before. So that was probably the main pain point initially. But I think moving forward with it, the other pain points we discover over time is access to systems. Who can access what platform are they on? So getting that common platform was a big advantage, no matter what it is. But getting some common platform, common language that people understand. The other pain points we do have a little bit is about technology users, but that's getting less now, I think. So that's why you got to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, got it. Okay, well, look, one final question. So what is next for your organisation in terms of Smartsheet? Because it sounds like, you're really getting into using most of the features and things like that. But what's next? What do you see happening in the future? Yeah,
so good question. We are exploring more about the more of the power of Smartsheet and the things it can do behind the scenes that we haven't necessarily explored. There are some things which may move out of Smartsheet and other things that may come in. But really our steps are to just learn a little bit more about what it can and can't do. And I've got to say that the way that it is evolving, it's not stagnant at all, the product. So as things and new initiatives come in, new developments, they're changing all the time. The fact that the forms now have logic on them and then the next step might be something else. All of those advancements are really quite exciting for us because we want to maximise those as best we can. Talking about hosting options and a range of things in the future will be, so it's a bit limitless about what we can use it for, but we've just got to get the right fit for that, and then work out, well, how is this going to make our business easier and more effective during an emergency?
Got it. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for that, Scott. On behalf of Smartsheet and also the audience today, I just want to say thank you for making the time to present. I've no doubt that people have found this really valuable in terms of the pointers that you've given, and I've certainly enjoyed hearing about it, especially given that it's such an important function, I think, for communities to have people like you doing what you do. So thank you so much. So look, everyone, that brings us to the end of our session. Next up, we've got a 15-minute demo of your choice, which you can select from the sessions area. So that's back on the main stage page, and there's 8 to choose from. each in a different stream, so lots of options. And then after that, we'll see you back on the main stage for our closing wrap-up. And there's going to be some exciting key product announcements, so make sure you tune in to hear what's happening. And we'll also have the closing remarks from our Vice President of Asia Pacific, Nigel Mendonça. And a reminder to also check out our Learning Centre if you haven't already, as we encourage you to interact with the community there, and think about also if you'd like to become Smartsheet certified, which is also an option. So thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of the event.